Hello again. I am really late. Let's write some code. Today we're going to be talking about DOM event listeners, and they're basically powerful little notifications of when something happens on your page, such as when a button's clicked, or when the document has finished loading, when an animation has finished or started, or even when the browser goes offline. So let's add a button to our page using document create element, and the text of the button is going to say growl. So if we want to add an event to know when this button has been clicked, we'll use bear.addEventListener, and we want to listen to the click event on this element. We're going to pass it in a function that will be called when this button is clicked, and for now we'll just console log out grr to know, not grr, to know that the button's been clicked. And then we'll add the button to our page with document body append child. And now when we go click the growl button, you see we console log out the word grr. Now that's great and all, but maybe we only want to let this bear growl once. And so we want to remove this event listener after it's been clicked once. And so to do that, you call remove event listener on the element. And you specify which event listener you want to remove on that element. And you also have to specify the function that you originally added with add event listener. And so to do that, we're going to just give our function up here a name called onClick. And now we can use that variable here when we remove our event listener to remove the correct event listener. So now when we go over here to growl and click growl, you'll notice that it only growls once. Now the reason we need to give the function that we use to add the event listener when we remove the event listener is because you can add multiple event listeners to an element. So here we have two functions, growl and eat, and we're going to add an event listener that calls each of these on a click. So the first one will be growl, and the second one will be eat. Comment this code out. Now when we click our button, we get both grr and yum, calling both of those functions. But now if we want to remove the event listener on eat, and we specify the eat function, you'll notice we still get the growl function being called. Another way is some elements have special on event properties that you can set. So rather than using add event listener, you can just set the property. So for instance, onClick is one of those. So we can say onClick function console log grr and get the same effect of using add event listener where our bear can growl. The only downside to this is that we can only register one function, one event listener at a time, whereas add event listener, we can register multiple event listeners. There are many different events that you can listen for, and each element has its own set of events that you can register with it. Now you may have noticed that in my event listener functions, I've been adding the letter E as the first parameter here. And E stands for event. You can write it as event. Some people write it as EVT. I just use the letter E. Feel free to use whatever name you prefer. Now this event contains a ton of useful stuff. One of those is eTarget. The target will give us the element that was clicked. So if we console log out the target here and click our growl button, you'll see that we get the button itself that was clicked. Another really useful thing on the event is the function preventDefault. This will cancel the original action of the event, such as if you have a link on the page and you click the link, normally it would take you to the page. Well, if you called preventDefault, it would prevent that. Another way is when I right click, or I'm using two-finger click here, I get this context menu on my page. But what if I wanted to write my own context menu? I would need to cancel or preventDefault this original context menu. And so to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an event to the document here, add event listener, and we're going to add the context menu event that gets called normally when you do a right click on an element or the page here. And so in my function, I am going to add this E, and I'm going to call E preventDefault. And instead, we're going to show our own menu that we would build later. And so now when I right click on the page, you'll see I no longer get the original menu, but instead we're console logging out our own custom message. Probably one of the coolest parts about DOM events is that they can bubble up through the page. So let's go ahead here and create a forest. Create elements. we're just going to create a div tag here. And we're going to loop through and create a ton of bears in our forest. So let's just do 100 bears. Const bear, document, create element. And these will all be buttons. And the content of the buttons will say, I don't know, click, and the number of the bear that we're looping through. And so let's go ahead and add each of these bears, append child, to our forest. And then we can add our forest to the document here. And so now you see we get a ton of bears in our forest, and we want to have each one of these bears growl every time we click them. Now what we could do is we could just simply here add an event listener to every single bear that we have added, but that's hundreds of bears, and it could potentially be thousands of bears depending on how fast they breed. So what we want to do is we want to add what's called a delegate event. So rather than adding our click handler to the bear, we're going to add it to the forest instead. And we just want to know if anything in the forest was clicked. So now when we click on anything in the forest, we're going to console log out the eTarget, the element that was clicked in the forest. And so now as you click through the forest, you can see button click 22 was clicked. Now click 40, click 51, that. And so that's why eTarget is super useful with these delegate events. Now these events will bubble up all the way up your document, starting down here all the way into the button, to your div forest tag, to your body, and all the way back up to the window. So if we wanted to just see if anything was clicked on the page, we can simply add the event listener to the document itself. Click function. And now when we console log out the eTarget here on the document, you'll notice that even if we don't click on a button, we get the forest element that we've clicked on, or even if we try to click outside of it, we'll get the body itself. Now let's say we had an element such as a cat that's in our forest. We're going to add our cat here, document, create element, there'll be another button here. And the cat text content will say meow. And we're going to add the cat to the forest with append child. And we'll go ahead and add a event listener that when this cat is clicked, it will say meow, of course, or mew, yeah, it's on mew. So now we have this button here that should just meow, and what happens though is that we get all these different event listeners happening, and that's because what happened is first this event listener got the mew, and then it bubbled up, and then the forest got the click, and then further on the document got the click. But what we want is we only want the cat to meow and not any of these other event listeners. So to prevent it from going up any further beyond this event listener, we can call a function called stopPropagation. And what this will do is as soon as this event is handled, it will stop it from bubbling up any further. So now when we click our mew button, it will meow, or the opposite of what I said. In our forest event listener, we are console logging out eTarget, and the eTarget will be the button that was actually clicked. But what if instead we wanted to get the element that the event was registered to instead? We can use, instead of target, we can use current target. And current target will give us the forest when any of these buttons is clicked within it. Now, if you've been watching this video the whole time, you may have noticed this little false thing I'm adding to the end, and it might be driving you nuts. What is that? Why does he keep writing false? What this is called use capture. And so there's different ways that you can capture an event as it happens on the DOM. So for instance, when I go and click a button, first the window hits it, and then it goes down to the document, and down through the body, down through the div, and all the way down here to the button. And then once it registers that target, it will then proceed to bubble up, back up through the document, and all the way up again. And so what we've been doing is we've been saying false because we only care about listening or hearing that event as the event bubbles up from the target. So for instance here, our cat, when it's clicked, we call stopPropagation, which prevents the forest and the document from getting the click event. But if our forest has set to true, which means we want to capture this event as the event's going down the document event. Now, as you see, when we click the cat, we first console log out the forest element, and then it meows first because we captured the event as it was going down the DOM rather than going back up. Now, capturing, unless you have a very specific reason for it, you probably should just always set it to false because DOM events, when they bubble up, are much more useful to use. But I just wanted to explain capturing in case you're wondering why I'm always putting false at the very end of my add event listener statements. So I hope this video has helped you understand DOM event listeners. And if it has, then please share the video and help others. And if you want to see more videos in like 2 years, then please subscribe. Thanks again for watching.